So welcome to this evening session. In this session, I'll be showing you how to automate a real estate deal vetting solution. Now, this is a solution that we've pulled from Upwork. Upwork is a website that people use to advertise jobs that they're prepared to pay money for. Now, this job would utilize your AI knowledge, your automation knowledge, and potentially your real estate knowledge if you have some of that. Unfortunately, I have all three bits of knowledge, so it'll be very useful for all of us to learn from what I'm about to build. Now let's have a quick look at what the job spec says. The person who posted this job posted it 6 days ago, and they've said that they're looking for an experienced n8n developer and an automation specialist. That's us. And then he's split what he wants into 5 different categories. So the first step would be to pull information from Zillow when he sends an address. So you've got to think about how you'd receive that address and how you're going to program the trigger that would be activated when the address arrives. The second thing is he wants a call out to Rentometer, and Rentometer is an API. And the third thing is to save and process that data. And then the next 2 things were to pull comparable sales and output that information neatly into Airtable, Google Sheets, or both. So the first thing you'd want to do if you receive the spec is you'd want to clarify exactly what he wants, because ultimately you want to develop what he is prepared to pay for. But when you have things like Airtable form or Webhook, that's neither, because if you developed it using the easiest, in my mind, the easiest would be a webhook trigger. He might say, actually, it's not webhook that I want Airtable. So get the specification clear, get the happy path. What's called happy path is, okay, I'm using Airtable, then I want Airtable to trigger an endpoint within n8n, and then the rest of the steps within his requirements get completed. So that's the first thing to do. Get the specification clear so that everyone understands it, signed off, and then you can go off and develop. Because Airtable, Form, Webhook, there are 3 different technologies that you'd have to implement. And today I'll show you what Airtable looks like. I'm more likely to use the Form option because that integrates quite easily into some like n8n or any of the other automation platforms. Now, n8n is similar to Zapier or make.com, so it's not something to be scared of. It's something that you can easily use and learn quite quickly. So just to show you what Airtable looks like, Airtable is a cloud-based spreadsheet, essentially. How it's different from your normal Google Sheet or Excel is that there's a lot of software that's been written in the background to make some of those tables, or to give you functionality to make those tables easy to interact with each other. What do I mean by table? So within Airtable, you've got something called a base. So that base is what all the different sheets within your Google Sheets would live in. So if you think of a table as a sheet, like your Google Sheet or Excel spreadsheet, then it'll be easy for you to understand. So here's one that's called VALAP. So the base is VALAP, and then within VALAP, we have a table or a sheet called waitlist. And if you wanted to create another one, you just click on that drop down next to the current table, click Add Table. I tend to start from scratch because I don't have data to begin with, but you can add from other sources. So you can import data from Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel and Google Calendar. So start from scratch, and then you give the table a name. So let's call it Everyday AI. This rings a bell. Yeah, sorry, got that. So you can rename the table if you make a mistake. So AI. Right. So within this sheet, you have different columns. So these columns have been pre-populated for you. So you have a name. This name one is something called a primary column. So what that means is this is almost like your identifying row within this column. Okay, so that's how the Airtable works. So what I'll expect the person who's posted this job to provide you with would be an outline of what the table should look like if he insists on using Airtable. Why? Because you want to know what the columns are, so that if you're querying Airtable, you are pulling in the specific columns that will be used for the calculations. So typically what you'd expect to see would be if it's a UK based job, well in this case it's American, so you might want to do what do they call theirs? They don't call them postcodes, something code, I can't remember, but in the UK it'll be something like postcode. So you'd have a column called postcode, and then it'll be a single line of text, and then you save that. So I've just renamed the name to postcode, and then you come in here. I'm editing a pre-existing column, so I might say address line 1, yeah, and so on. So that's what you'd have to do. The other thing that you'd have to do as well is for n8n to be able to read information from Airtable, you'd have to provision an API key. So an API key, API stands for Application Programmatic Interface, or Application Programmable Interface. So what that means is like it's a website, is the site that n8n would connect to in order to read information that's required. So for that, there's some technical changes you'd have to make. So you'd have to go to the base, and then I believe you have to do, so you could do it through here. Let me move this out of the way. Do integrations, I don't think. If I go to account, so within account, hopefully I'm not exposing anything. So these are different bases. I'll pick this for base. No, not this one. So public API usage, it's not that. So, and what I'm showing you is actually on the free tier, which is quite good. Where is it? Okay, can't find the API. Can I do it through here? No. So there is the option to, if I create something here, don't know why I can't find it right now. Accounts, notifications, appearances. Let me see integrations if it's there. You've granted Airtable access to these accounts. Third-party integrations. Okay, so this is for external stuff trying to connect into this Airtable, so it's not quite the same. But if I go to Builder Hub, then let's see what that gives us. So with Builder Hub, you've got, yeah, this is where it is. Sorry. So on the Builder Hub, you've got the personal access tokens. So these tokens are things that you'd have to create in order for n8n to connect in to your Airtable database. Okay, so the first bit is we're saying is either Airtable or forms. If the person who posted this job says it's forms that they want you to use, then they need to tell you what type of form to use. If they don't provide it, then you can suggest something like Tally form. So the website for that is Tally.so. So with Tally.so, you can create forms and they'll be hosted for you, even on the free tier. Right? So you can give the form a title, let's say real estate deal vetting. And then you say, so press enter to start from scratch. So start from scratch. So what you then do is here you can say, put a /, and then within / you can pick one of these things. So here it's saying short answer. So short answer just essentially means that it will be short string that it would accept. So if we click short answer, then you can put a question, what is the postcode? Okay, so and then the person will be required to put the postcode inside this text box. There are other things you can do on here, which are like, you can specify that this line would be required. So all of this would come from the requirements. So you can see why you need to be clear with the person who specified the job spec what's required. Okay, so I've said I'm going to use form, so I would use form in that sense, in sense that I'll build out something like this, and then I would add another sheet, another short answer, which would be, let's say, address line 1, and then create another one, just do short answer, address line 2. So something like in the UK, the postcode is one of the most important aspects for real estate deal vetting, because the comparables tend to be based on the postcode as opposed to one specific address. So you might want to say that this first one is a mandatory field, but this second one, address line 2, isn't mandatory. So you just click that button and that goes away. So when you go to test it and you click one of these buttons, it will just say, it would let it go through, but if there's no address line 1, it wouldn't go. So that's the first aspect through this job. So put information from Airtable or form, and we're saying form, and then either way there would still have to be a webhook trigger, because if you think about the information that you've retrieved or you've stored in Airtable, which is your online spreadsheet, or the information that the person clicks submit on via the Tally form, that information needs to go somewhere. The form doesn't save the information for you. The form would call your n8n endpoint. So that n8n endpoint would be this here. So if we come in here and just click add first step, and we want it to be a trigger. So the first thing you tend to add would be a trigger. So here it's asking you, So here's asking you what trigger you want to add to the workflow. So all I did was click this plus, and then this thing popped on the right hand side. Okay, so I'm going to say the options are trigger manually, on app event, on a schedule, webhook call, on form submission, when executed by another workflow, on chat message, and the like. So when executing on another workflow, it means you can have multiple workflows, and one of those workflows can trigger this workflow, which is good. Also a good way of having workflows split out neatly. But in our case, let's say on webhook call. So if I select on webhook call, it then gives me a URL, and this URL here specifies what the either Airtable needs to call or what the form needs to trigger when it decides to call, or when a submit has been made. So this URL is for this workflow. So here we can say, okay, let's listen for events. So if we listen for events, okay, let's stop listening actually, and then copy this and go to form. Now there are different types of ways you can call this webhook. There's a system called get, a method called get. So get is essentially, if you're not going to pass information in the payload of your call, then you can use a get. Now this is just when you're calling an endpoint, just using the URL, that's the name, the website address. So that's the URL. So everything you're using to trigger this endpoint would be stored in just this one line. But when you call endpoints, sometimes you'd want to send a lot more information than just what would fit on the link. So what you do then is you'd send it via post. So post is when you're posting or sending new information, and there are other methods, but for this we'd use post. And the reason we're using post is because we're going to send information that's provided to us on the form. So if I go back to the form and I say here, and I go into settings and I say So bear in mind this is on the free tier. So some of the information like made by Tally would be on the would be on the form when it's being filled in. So if it's something you don't want, then you just subscribe and get. Okay, so let me save this first. Maybe give me back. So back to editor, real estate deal vetting. Okay, that's it. If I publish this, then so it's published, and we now have a URL for this, and then we have integrations, and then with integrations in here we are going to okay, so you'd see here you've got Airtable, so that means you can send the information from the form straight into that Airtable that we looked at. You also have make, that means you can automatically trigger an endpoint or one of the endpoints in make. We don't have n8n here, but what we do have is webhook, so we can say connect. So when we say connect, it would ask you for the endpoint URL. So let's put in the URL here and then say connect. Okay, so then it will check. Okay, it doesn't check straight away, but it's going green, which is fine. So what this then means is that when I press save on the form, so let me go back to the form, my real estate deal vetting form, and if we go to share, we can copy the link. So come in here, paste the link. So with that link, you've got the form appearing. So this is how easy it is to create a form and have the form live for anyone to use it. So all you do is just send this link to your clients or whomever, and they can start using the form straight away. So in this case, we've got a client. The client can start using the form straight away and start testing what we're building. So within an hour, within 20 minutes, that is doable. So now let's have a look over here and say, okay, we've changed the method to post. So one of the things you'd want to do is you want to see how the information comes from the form so that you can use that to do things further down the line. So let's go to listen for test event. So it's now listening. Let's go back to the form. We'll say postcode. Let's put a postcode, and then we'll put one, Carol, close. So no second. Okay, we can just put Stratford here. Okay, and press submit. Right, so press submit and it's been picked up here straight away. Okay, so these are two different systems that we've just connected using a form on the one side and using the automation. So this automation picks it up, and then we're now able to build the rest of the steps in the flow. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll look at how the information comes in. So can you see here? We've got fields, and then we've got label, what is the postcode, which is the question I put there, and then the value is E15 1RS, and then the value here is one that, and then that. Now, one thing to note is when you create these forms, ideally you want the form to have keys that are predictable. So here we've got question, LK, blah blah blah, question, PO, question that. If you make changes to the form, that information might change, which doesn't help anyone. So what you can do is you can go back to the form and you can edit the form. And then here, I always forget where this is, but I think it is here. Over here, what is the postcode? That so that's required max duplicate turn into, let me see, let me try this actually. So edit, and then I do postcode, save. Okay, so what this does by default is it assigns the input box the same value that the label has. Okay, so we'll go to the next one, and then we'll click in this drag thing and then edit this, and then we'll give this address underscore line underscore 1. You could call it whatever you like, but make it something that's unique and only exists once in the form. So let me show you what it looks like when it's empty. So you can see field name. So that's the name of the field, and that's the name you want to remember when it gets posted. So address line 2, oops, 2, and we save that, and this is not required. Okay, so we publish it. Fine. Then we'll come in here, and then if you just refresh the thing, the form comes back up. Now let's look back over here, and you can see label what is the postcode, address line 1, and that for the input text. Okay, so let's listen again for what gets sent. So we go again, E15, 1RS, said 1, Carol close, and then we've got a Stratford. Okay, so we submit, so it gets picked up here, and then here you can now see that the label is postcode, the label is address line 1, address line 2. Now this then means that other steps down the line I can say, okay, I want you to find me postcode, I want you to find me address line 1, as opposed to question underscore Q055 blah blah blah, and that value changes every time. But with this one, because we've specified what the value should be, we can then use it down the line for subsequent steps. So that's us having gone through forms, Airtable, and n8n, and the integration between the form, which was Tally form, with n8n. Now if we go back to what the person asked for, he asked for when I send an address, so we've done that bit, pull property details from Zillow using Apify or API. Now Zillow is an American website, so something we can use here in the UK would be something like Rightmove that has an endpoint that we can call via API, or Zoopla. Zoopla used to have an endpoint that was free for developers, but now it's all for software developers, but now it's all paid. So we would have to come up with something different. There's another paid service by PropertyData that will give you something similar to this. So pull property details from Zillow. So in this case, the details we're not really, we'll just have to make it up. So they want current listing status, price point, days on the market, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and agent name, phone number. Now that information we can pull if we had the endpoint access. What we would do is we'd use the property data, and then with property data we'll just pull one value, and I can show you what property data looks like. So if we go to, I tend to go on property data using my Safari browser. Don't know why, it's just a habit. So Safari, and we go to property data. Okay, so oops. Okay. So that's my API key, which should not be made public. So I must remember to blur that out before I post the video. But anyway, that's the API key that you'd use to run API queries. So the sorts of information you have access to on here via API are, if you go to the overview, you've got things like, well, you've got 60 API endpoints now, so it's always increasing, but you've got things like matching addresses, looking for specific agents, and what we're looking for is listings. No, it is not called listings. When I see it, I know what it is. Okay, where are we? Yes, I think it's prices. Let me see if there's any other one. Yeah, it's prices. So prices shows you live local asking prices. So if we go into it, so we've got here. So it'll give you provide a UK postcode, and then it would then give you a postcode, provide a town, bedrooms, and things like that. Then it will give you what the output should look like. So one of our previous videos actually has this, where we provided. We use this to get the current live market values. So that's what we would use to pull current market data. Now, if we had a Zoopla subscription, a few years ago, Zoopla started charging, and at that point, I lost access to Zoopla. But does it say here? It doesn't have the API thing on here. Our rent. Okay, there's an endpoint that they have. They're not showing it on their homepage. But if we had our postcode, which is E15-1RS, you do a search, and then using that API endpoint, you'd be getting back all of these properties and all of these results. So we will do something to pull some information in our next session. Let's stop here, and with the next session we'll go through things a lot quicker, because subsequent steps would be pulling information from the API. In this case, it will be PropertyData that we use, and then Rentometer is another API. In fact, let's have a look at what is available. So Rentometer, just the API. So I'm assuming this is where you get rental values for specific locations. So you can see this YouTube video, how to get rent data from Rentometer API. So it seems like it's a fairly common integration. So harness the power of our best-in-class rent data via our API. So it's paid. The basic is $5. So I'm not going to pay for this, because all it is calling a web page or web endpoint, a website, to pull information, and you'd have to provide it with whatever it needs. So if you were the one getting this job, you'd obviously have to come in here, review the documentation to understand the information you need to pass into Rentometer, and then what you get back. So we'll do something similar, but this time with PropertyData. APIs generally tend to be similar. Most of them are written in similar languages and have similar ways of calling and handling information that comes back. So in our next session, we'll look at pulling live property data information from PropertyData. In our case, we'd also pull rental information from the same PropertyData, because they have rental information, and then we'll save that information to a Google Sheet. So this is another thing that I wanted to mention. When he says save and process data, and then says duplicate a Google Sheet Performer template, I imagine maybe Proforma or something. So you'd need this information to be provided to you so that you can complete the automation. So autofill the template, calculate current cash on cash return, and adjust purchase price. So that we'll look at in the next session. So we'll stop here, and then I'll say thank you very much for joining me today. Play around with whatever you can. We'll share the recording with you, John, and